The iPad Pro 9.7-inch model is an awesome tablet, no doubt. Combined with a few key accessories from Apple, and this tablet can not only be used for play, but also for serious business. But is it really that much different than previous iPad models? And what are the main differences between this new 9.7-inch iPad Pro and the 12.9-inch version that Apple announced late last year? Today we're going to be answering those questions, as well as doing a full review of Apple's latest iPad. So check it out. Hey guys, it's Dan at Smart Fox Computers, and now that I've had a couple of days to extensively use the latest iPad, that is the iPad Pro 9.7-inch model, I've been most impressed overall with the speed of this tablet, as well as the new features that have been added since the last normal size iPad, that is the last 9.7-inch model. And there's also some killer accessories Apple's selling for this one that we'll go over as well. So let's get into it. I wanted to get a couple things out of the way up front regarding the difference between this new 9.7-inch iPad Pro and the larger 12.9-inch iPad Pro that Apple released late last year. Specifically, this new 9.7-inch model has a 12-megapixel camera with a 5-megapixel FaceTime camera, whereas the larger 12.9-inch iPad Pro only has an 8-megapixel camera and a 1.2-megapixel FaceTime camera. Now, while I'm not going to get too technical in this review, I did want to mention a couple of other key differences between this newer, smaller iPad Pro and the larger one that Apple released late last year. Specifically, that is the CPU. While they both use Apple's latest A9X chip, this new 9.7-inch iPad Pro is running at 2.16 gigahertz versus the 2.26 on the 12-inch model. And also the new version here, the 9.7-inch iPad Pro, only has 2 gigs of RAM, where the 12-inch model has the 4 gigs of RAM. And while it's probably too early to tell with any great certainty, tests between the 12.9-inch model and this 9.7-inch model are showing that there's no real-world difference in speed. The last major difference I wanted to point out between the 12.9-inch iPad Pro and this new smaller 9.7-inch model is the screen. While the new 9.7-inch model uses something called True Tone Display, and we'll do a deeper dive into what that is later in the review, but suffice it to say this new screen is much improved over the 12.9-inch model. It's 25% brighter and 3 times less reflective than any iPad screen before it. This screen is amazing, and again, we'll get into that here in a moment. This new iPad Pro has the same dimensions as the iPad Air 2, so if you have a case for your iPad Air 2, it should fit, for the most part, they should fit just fine. You'll notice this is the first iPad with a flash, but it also has a camera bump similar to the iPhone 6 or 6S, but we didn't find any wobble when we sat this iPad on the table. Same volume buttons as an iPad Air series, but you'll notice on the bottom now there are 2 speakers, one on either side of the Lightning port. You'll notice on the side of the new iPad 9.7-inch, it has a smart connector just like the 12.9-inch iPad Pro. That's a first for one this size. But then on the top, you'll also notice 2 more speakers, giving it a grand total of 4, like the larger 12.9-inch iPad Pro. The power button and headphone jack being the same as previous generations. The smart connector on the side is used for accessories that are compatible with the smart connection, like Apple's own smart keyboard case. The smart keyboard case is very much like a typical silicone case on the outside, or like a silicone smart cover. It's got that silicone feel to it. On the inside, it's a microfiber type material that protects the screen, and then on the inside, it's got the full keyboard. The difference between this smart keyboard and legacy or typical Bluetooth keyboards is that this physically connects to the iPad through the 3 holes on the smart connector. The 3 prongs on the smart case line up with the 3 holes on the smart connector, and via magnets, very much like a smart case, they connect like so. The smart keyboard is remarkably thin when shut. You can see it's a little thicker than the rest of the cover, but it still feels really nice, it's easy to hold on to, and overall it really doesn't add much bulk to the iPad. Another thing to note here is the smart keyboard is also a wake-on open case, just like a typical smart cover, and it pops right off just like a typical smart cover. Separately, Apple also sells the rear case for the iPad Pro, It's a silicone case on the outside, just like the typical previous versions they've made for other versions of the iPad. It's got the microfiber finish on the inside, just like previous versions and just like the smart keyboard or smart cover. The iPad snaps right into the rear cover. Again, this doesn't add much bulk to the iPad, but it makes it a little more grippy and easy to hold on to. It also protects it if you lay it face down. There's a ridge around the edge of it so the glass doesn't actually touch the table, and it's compatible with the smart keyboard. So if you connect them together, it's a case that covers both the front and back, same finish, same material, and it looks like one piece entirely. Now, the case took a little bit of practice to figure out how to unfold it to be in the standing position, to be in the drawing position, and to be in the keyboard position. But if you flip the keyboard around the back like so, this is what Apple refers to as the viewing position. So the keyboard is facing out of the back, it's no longer connected to the iPad, and you can stand it up like a traditional smart cover to watch movies or, use it without the keyboard. We also found that it's pretty stable, so if you push against it, it doesn't flip over easy like some of the legacy smart covers did for previous generation iPads. And although not marketed in this position by Apple, but if you keep the case in the same position and lay it on its back like so, it's the perfect position to use the Apple Pencil to do drawing on the iPad. We found that you can put a reasonable amount of pressure on the screen when drawing, and it stays in this position without sliding down. Although at first it feels a little like origami, after a couple tries it was pretty simple to switch from this position to the keyboard position by opening it up and then folding it back, putting the iPad into the slot on the keyboard itself, which then connects the keyboard to the iPad. Now the really nice thing about the smart keyboard is that it's connected physically to the iPad, so it's not using Bluetooth, it's always connected, there is no delay, it doesn't disconnect if you quit typing for a while like a typical Bluetooth keyboard. It also doesn't require a battery or charging, it runs off the iPad's power itself. Now, I'd read mixed reviews on the smart keyboard, so I really didn't know what to expect, but I did find after very little practice, I was able to type at almost full speed. The keys are a little shallow, they feel very much like the keys on the latest 12-inch MacBook, and overall I was very pleased with the keyboard. Now, there's been many reviews of the Apple Pencil when it came out last December with the 12.9-inch iPad Pro, but for those unfamiliar before I get into drawing with it, it's about the length of a sharpened wooden pencil. It's got these little plastic nibs that screw onto the top. It comes with one extra one in the pack. It's very responsive, it's pressure sensitive, it's very precise, it's angle sensitive. The back of it charges through a lightning connection. You can charge it by plugging it into an iPad or into the included adapter and into a lightning cable. It's very comfortable in hand, very well balanced. We found that it's actually really fun to draw with. Now, if you get the Apple Pencil with either the larger or smaller version of the iPad Pro, we do recommend an app called Procreate. It's a very versatile painting and drawing app, but using it with the Apple Pencil, it's especially great because the Apple Pencil can detect the pressure that you're pushing down, the angle that you're using if you want to do shading, if you're doing sketching with the pencil tool. It also will allow you, the iPad Pro that is, will allow you to set your hand on the screen while you're drawing, and it will not detect your hand when you're using the pencil, so it makes it a lot more comfortable experience to draw. We found the pencils very precise. We found that it's very much like drawing on paper or painting on canvas. The only real difference is there's no tooth on the screen, and there are screen protectors that they sell for professional artists or digital artists that would like for it to feel more like paper or canvas when they draw. But overall, the experience has been really nice, and we're enjoying painting and drawing on the iPad with the Apple Pencil. One last thing I wanted to mention about Apple Pencil is that if you take notes on your iPad with applications like Note Shelf, it works great for that too. One of the most impressive things about the new iPad is actually the display itself. It's the most advanced Apple's ever made, and you can certainly tell. And the sound quality on this thing blew me away.
Huh?
So let's talk about that new display. As I mentioned at the beginning of this review, Apple states that this screen is 3 times less reflective than any other iPad before it. And if you compare it to an older display like this iPad 4, the difference is notable. Not just the reflection of the light in the screen, but if you look at the black border around either of the iPads, you can see how much nicer it is on the iPad Pro than on the old iPad 4. And if you're going to be in areas where there's a lot of reflection, say outside or directly under a light like this new anti-reflective technology makes a huge difference. The display on the new iPad Pro 9.7 inch is 25% brighter than any iPad screen before it. And when you look at it compared to a previous generation iPad screen like the iPad 4, you can definitely tell the difference in the overall colors and the saturation. The blacks are more black, everything's a little nicer. And that True Tone display technology I mentioned before works like this. There are ambient light sensors in the new iPad Pro, a first for an iPad, that detect the ambient color of light in the room. Based on that, the iPad adjusts the color of itself to more match a natural look, like you were looking at an actual paper picture or a piece of paper with notes on it. And although I couldn't get it to come out on the camera here, this is something you have to see in person. Initially, I thought it was going to be more of a gimmick, but having now used it for a couple of days, it's one of those features I can't wait to get on future iPhones and such. So what's our overall synopsis of the iPad Pro 9.7 inch? If it's not obvious by now, we were big fans of it and consider it a worthwhile upgrade, especially if you prefer what we refer to as normal size iPad, and that is the 9.7 inch screen. Combining the horsepower of Apple's latest A9X chip, the Smart Connector, a first on a 9.7 inch iPad, allowing it to connect to accessories like the Apple Pencil and the Smart Keyboard, and the most advanced display that Apple's ever made, we consider this a contender for the very best iPad yet. So thanks for watching a review of the Apple iPad Pro 9.7 inch. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like and subscribe below. Thanks, and we'll see you in the next one.